Hey guys, how you going? My name is Dom and today we're going to be building a days until counter using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Okay, so the main purpose of today's video is going to be to cover many concepts when it comes to web development, in particular HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So this video right here and this code is going to be super beneficial for those of you who are just starting out to learn HTML, CSS and JavaScript. And for the rest of you, if you just want a nice counter on your website, then of course this video is going to be for you. So as we can see right here, we have the finished product. We have this very nice days until counter, and it says right here we've got this many days, hours, minutes and seconds until December 31st 2021, and it is very simple and straightforward in how it works. So one last thing before we get into the actual code itself, we're going to be making use of a JavaScript library called Day.js. Now, before you click away, trust me, when it comes to dates and times in JavaScript, you definitely want to be using a library. The reason is because when it comes to durations and finding differences in time, as well as localization and formatting, that stuff can get very complex. So use a library when it comes to date and time. It's going to save you so much time, it's ridiculous, and also bugs. So anyway, we're going to be using this library right here. It is free to use and it is a nice alternative to Moment.js. So let's go inside this tab right here and begin from scratch to create what I just showed you. So inside the HTML, we can see we've got both a CSS file called main.css and a JavaScript file called main.js included right here inside this blank HTML file. And of course, both these CSS and JS files are also empty. So we've got a fresh starting point. So the first step here is going to be to write the HTML for the days until counter. So right here, we can create a new div. We can call this div until. So this right here is just a class, of course, and I'm just using a shortened name for days until just to keep it a little bit cleaner. So now inside here, we need to then specify each one of our components for hours, minutes, days, etc. So we can say right here, a new div with a class of until __ component. So right here we can see with this __ sort of syntax, I'm making use of the block element modifier CSS class naming convention, but you can name these classes whatever you like. So anyway, this right here is going to be a sub-component of the days until counter, one of the hours, minutes, seconds, or days. So inside here now, we can make a new div. We can call this div until __ numeric. So this numeric one is going to be where the number is going to be stored. So we can also give this a second class of until __ numeric. Then we're going to use -- to identify a modifier for this class, and the modifier is just going to be something like days. So this right here is just telling us that this particular div is for the days part of the countdown. And inside here we can just say 00 as the default number of days. And then just below here we can make a second div called until __ unit for unit of time. Inside here we can just say days in a text form. This of course will be displayed to the user. So now we're going to save this and we get something like this in the browser. No, we don't. Let's actually run the live server and get this thing working. There we go. Okay, so we have this right here in the browser. As we can see, nothing too fancy so far. So now we're just going to be essentially copy and pasting this 3 more times. We're going to be using now the hours just like this. We can say hours here, then we can say minutes, then we can say minutes again, then seconds, and then of course seconds right down here. Saving this is going to give us this right here. So of course we're going to be using CSS grid to space out all of these elements and of course make them look really nice. So the next step here is going to be to simply display the full until this date on the bottom. So for that we can make a new div right down here, and this one is going to be until __ event. Let's do event right there. So this right here is just going to be the event name. For example, until, let's just do 31st December 2021. Save this, and we get this right here. So we're actually done when it comes to the HTML markup for the countdown timer. So now we can move on to the CSS to, of course, make it look pretty. So going inside the CSS right up here, we're going to begin by targeting the main until component right up here. So for this one, we're going to give this a simple margin of 25px, followed by a maximum width of something like 500px right there. Save this, and now we can see we have, of course, a bit of a margin on the borders there of the main CSS. No, of the until, my mistake. And we can see here, of course, if I was to zoom out, we can see that the maximum width is set on the until right there at 500px. As we can see here, it stops in the middle there, so that's working perfectly fine. I might just zoom in a little bit more, just like this, and we should be good to go. Yep, perfect. So now, like I said, we're going to be using CSS grid to space out the components. So we're going to say display right here, then we're going to say grid. So this is going to allow us to essentially specify a width of columns. Okay, so we can basically say we want 4 columns for the initial part, days, hours, minutes, and seconds. So to achieve that, we're now going to say grid template columns. Then we're going to say repeat right here. We're going to put in repeat 4 times 1fr. So this may look confusing for people new to CSS grid, but essentially we're saying right here we want 4 columns of 1fr, and 1fr just means 1 units of the available space. So if you have 4 1frs like this, it just means that every single column is going to take up the same width. So we can see here in the browser, if I was to hover over the until just like that, we get the grid right there. We have the little dotted lines, those 4 columns of equal width, and that right there is what the repeat for 1fr is doing. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to also put a gap between each one of these components. So we're going to say gap right here and set the gap to be 1 EM. The same goes for the padding, just like this. And just to demonstrate what's actually happening here, I'm just going to add a background of 009578, save this, and now we get this right here. As we can see, once again we have the padding, the green bits on the left, the green bits around the edges there. Then we have inside the middle, we have that purple sections, and those of course are the gap. So got the same gap and same padding, 1 EM. Now for those of you who don't know what 1 EM means, 1 EM just means 1 times the current font size. So the current font size happens to be 16px, so 1 EM right here just means 16px. If I make this 2 EM, this means 32 px, just like this. And of course now it is much bigger in terms of the gaps of the grid, just like that. So let's put this back and we can continue. So the next step here is going to be a bit of aesthetics. So we're going to say border radius, set this to be 5px, just like this. We're going to set also a box shadow of 0, 0, 5 pixels, then RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0.3 to achieve a 30% opacity on the black box shadow. Save this, and we get this right here. And lastly, we can set the color of the text to be white and the font family to be, let's just do sans serif for this example right here. Let's save this, and now we get something like this. Now, I might actually put the gap back to 1 EM as it was before. That makes sense, and there we go. So we are done with styling up the until main component. The next step is going to be the subcomponents right here, the days, hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's go down here. We're going to say until __ components. And for these ones, it's going to be really straightforward. We're just going to say text align of center. We are then going to say background. Going to make the background here to be white, just so we can actually get some contrast with the background of the green there. We can also say a border radius of 5px to make it look nice. Let's save this, and we get this right here. Now, what's the problem here? Of course, we can't read the text. So to fix that, let's target the until numeric class, and for this one, we can firstly set a color. You know what? Actually, my mistake. What am I doing? We need to set, let's get rid of this right here, just like that. Oh, what happened there? Try again. Let's get rid of the color on the main one, just like this, keep it as default. And then we're going to set the color on the numeric instead, so targeting the actual numbers themselves. So for this, we're just going to say something like dark gray 333, and then I'm going to give this a padding of 0.5 EM for top and bottom, and 0 for the left and right, just like that. We can also give this a font size of 3 EM, and lastly a font weight of bold. Let's save this right here, and we get something like this. So I want to mention that the reason why I'm using EM is because it's going to be, or it's because it is a relative unit, which means I can set my font size somewhere else, or on the actual until right here, I can set the font size once. For example, 10px, we can see it affects everything. It affects the gap, the padding, the font size, it affects everything. So that is why we're using the EM, relative units. That way, if I want to change the font size on the fly, it's going to apply to everything. It's going to make it a lot easier as opposed to using absolute units like px instead. So anyway, let's remove that and go back to normal, just like that. So we are done with the until numeric. Let's move on to the until __ unit. So for the units part right here, this is just going to be essentially the labels. So for this, we're going to apply a quick font size of 1.2 EM, as well as a padding bottom of 1 EM. So once again, using the EMs to make sure everything is in sync. Let's give this a font weight of bold, for example, if you like, and also a color. Let's make this color 94001B, just a nice dark red. Let's save this, and we get this right here. As we can see, it is looking pretty good so far. Now, we can move on to the last CSS section, and that is going to be the actual event title right here. So I'm going to target until __ event. So for this one, it's going to be interesting. So we're going to be making use of grid column. So I'm going to say grid column right here, and basically this is going to allow us to specify our text or our actual event like div to span multiple rows. So right here we can see it's just taking up the first column right here. So let's make this span the entire width of the actual container. So for this, we're going to say span, then we're going to say 4. Save this, and now we can see it is spanning 4 of the actual columns. If I was to say, for example, span 2, now it's only going to span the 2 ones. We can see right there, it's only going to go up to the 2 columns right there. So that is what that is going to do. And now we can give a text align of center, once again, just like the previous ones. We can also give this a color of white, and lastly, a font weight of bold. So pretty straightforward CSS rules right here. The most complicated part is probably going to be the usage of the CSS grid, and also, of course, the relative EM units right there. But that is going to be the CSS for the solution. So now we're going to move on to everyone's favorite part, of course, the JavaScript. So let's go inside the main.js right here. Now, the first thing to do is going to be to include our JavaScript library. So let's go to the Day.js website, and now going to go to the docs right up here, and we're going to go to the installation section. We're going to be installing for the browser. Now, for those of you out there who know how to use Node.js or TypeScript, of course, you're going to follow these instructions, but for us right here, we're going to be making use of the browser method. Okay, so it's going to be a simple include, just like many basic libraries, especially the older ones. So anyway, let's go to cdnjs.com to grab our link for the library. So right here, we're going to need the first one, the actual minified library itself. So I'm going to copy this link right here, then go back in the HTML, and we're going to be including right down here inside the script, just like this. I'm going to paste in the link to our library, just like that. And now we can specify a second script tag, and this second one is going to be used for the plugin duration. So there's basically a nice plugin for the Day.js library called duration, and that one is going to allow you to do things with durations, which of course we need for this particular use case. So I'm going to copy the link for the duration plugin right down here, as we can see, if you can actually read that. It says duration or plugin / duration. I'm going to copy this, then paste it inside our source, and we're good to go. So let's save this, and now we have access to the Day.js library. So there's actually one last step to get this to work, and that is going to be, because of course we can see here that we have the base library right up here, but also this plugin. So we need to tell the actual base plugin, sorry, the base library, to make use of the plugin. So to do that, I'm going to go inside the main.js, and we're going to say Day.js, just like this. So Day.js dot extend, and then pass through here inside extend. I'm going to pass through Day.js underscore plugin underscore duration. So of course, the spelling of these characters right here is going to be important, because these come directly from the library itself. So basically, when you include the first one, it's going to give you Day.js. When you include the second one, it's going to give you Day.js plugin duration. So now we have linked up the library and everything's good to go. So right down here, the way it's going to work is we're going to be writing a single function, and this function is going to be essentially activating our element right up here. It's going to be activating this as a countdown timer. So we're going to pass into our function the date to count down to. So let's go inside here. We're going to say function, and then we're going to say activate countdown, just like this. Okay, you can call this whatever you like, it's up to you. But inside here, going to take through the element itself. So the element refers to the actual until div right here. And also a second argument is going to be the date as a string. So an example usage of this function, and to get our countdown to work, is going to be something like this. We're going to say activate countdown, and then pass through here firstly the main until element div. So we're going to say document.query selector, and we're going to say, you know what, actually let's scrap this. We're going to say get elements by ID, then pass through here my countdown, for example, just like this. And now of course got to go back inside, actually this is going to be, yeah, that's going to be lowercase d. So now let's go back inside the HTML and give this until an ID of my countdown. So now it's going to grab the element right here, and then we're going to say let's count down to 2020-12-31. Actually 2021-12-31. Just like this. So we're saying activate this countdown, or this element, to count down to December 31st, 2021. Okay, so it's also very important that you actually pass in your dates here using the ISO format. So that just means do your year dash month dash day. Don't do month dash year dash day. Just keep it as year, month, day. Simple. So now, inside this function, the first step is going to be to grab, grab our date string right here, and then convert it into a Day.js object. Okay, so essentially this library is going to allow us to create objects, and these objects are going to essentially just be special objects to deal with dates. Okay, so they basically represent a date itself. So it's going to be much easier to explain with an example. So let's go inside here. We're going to say const target date is equal to, and then we're going to say Day.js, then going to pass through here the date string. So this right here is going to be creating our date object, and the target date is going to be, of course, that object. So now, if I was to console.log target date and save this, go back inside the browser, in the console, we get right here this massive object containing all of this stuff. So this right here is the library in use. Okay, so we can see here we have all of these different things we can call. We can say date, add, day, days in month, is after, is before, is same. We can make use of all these different things here to, you know, gather information about our date. This right here is much better than just the simple string of, you know, 2021, 12/31. Okay, so that is how it's going to work. So now we have this target date. So the first step is logically just going to be to update this label. So let's actually make this label something like, let's do the 3rd of February. Okay, that's the date right now. February 3rd, 2021. We get this right here. So now let's go back inside here and we're going to say element, so grabbing the actual element itself, so this main countdown element, we're going to say element.query selector. Then we're going to say inside here dot until __ event. So we're targeting the event label right here. Then we're going to say dot text content is equal to, and I might just zoom out right here to make it a bit more fit on the page. Going to say right here using JavaScript template string, so using the backticks right here near the 1 on the keyboard. Using backticks, we're going to say until, then $ curly braces. Inside here, I'm going to put a bit of JavaScript. So we're going to say target date dot format. So like I said, this right here is a library, so you can make use of these different methods like formatting. So inside format, you're going to pass through essentially a mask of, you know, text. So for example, if you want to convert this object right here of different things that aren't readable or aren't legible, if you want to convert this right here into a string like this, for example, you're going to use format. So let's go back inside here in the actual documentation for the library. Let's go to the display section right here and go to the format option. So here we can see we can pass through all of these different formats and it's going to give us the actual output. So for example, if you want, you know, the day of the month, capital D. So we can say D right here, then we put a space, then we can say for the month, 4 M's for the long month name. So 1, 2, 3, 4, just like this, then a space, we can say year, 2018 or whatever it is, 4 Y's. So now 4 Y's right there. Let's save this and now we get right here until 31st December 2021, just like that. Okay, and that right there is the benefit of a library. It's really easy to do this kind of thing and it's all done for you. So anyway, let's go down here now and we're going to be essentially running a piece of JavaScript code every quarter of a second. So we're going to say set interval right here, and inside here we can see we are passing through a function just like this. Then we're going to say 250. So basically every 250 milliseconds or every quarter of a second, this function right here is going to run. This function is going to update our label days, hours, minutes, and seconds. Okay, and that is how the ticker works, and it updates automatically. So inside this function, the first step is going to be to calculate the difference in time between now now and the target date. So inside here we can say const now is equal to, then we can say Day.js without providing any arguments, just like this. So now essentially this now constant is going to be the same thing as target date, but of course now instead of the target date, if that makes sense. So moving on, to calculate the difference in time between these two dates, we're going to use a method. It's called duration. So we're going to say const duration is equal to Day.js.duration, and then we're going to say target date.diff, then we're going to say now. So this right here is obviously a little bit full on, a little bit confusing. So essentially target date.diff right here is finding the difference between the two dates as a number. So I believe if I go back to documentation right here, if we go to the diff method, you can see here diff gives us the difference between these two dates in milliseconds. And then we're grabbing this massive milliseconds number, and we are then saying, let's create a duration object out of that milliseconds. Okay, so if this makes no sense, watch it again, and it should make sense hopefully. But essentially, this dot duration right here is grabbing the milliseconds amount and then creating a new object out of that. And this duration object, okay, has different things on it to convert our time. We're going to see that right now, so don't stress. Okay, so going down here, we're going to say, elements. You know what, actually, no. Let's console.log. Let's console.log duration dot, let's do as weeks. So we're saying duration dot as weeks. It's going to give us the duration between these two dates as weeks. So let's save this back in the browser. We get 47.15, etc. So there are 47 weeks until December 31st, 2021. As we can see, it is constantly changing as time moves on, okay? And that is why that works. Now, the problem with this is that that's actually 47 weeks, okay? If I say, for example, as hours, get a big number, as hours, there are 7,921 hours until that date. Problem with this is that obviously we don't want 7,900 inside our little thing here. We actually want, you know, for example, 4 hours. So this many days, this many hours, etc. So to do that, we're going to be using the dot hours without that as. This one, we just get 1. So down the pipeline, you know, it's going to be whatever how many days, then 1 hour, X amount of minutes, X amount of seconds. Okay? So with this being said, we can do the same thing for days, hours, minutes, and seconds. And of course, put that number inside our divs. So let's go back inside here. Elements. Okay, dot query selector. Then we're going to say dot until underscore underscore numeric dash dash seconds. We're going to target the seconds numeric right up here, right down here. We're going to say dot text content is equal to, then we're going to say duration dot seconds, just like this. Okay, then dot to string. So we're going to convert our seconds amount to a string, because now we need to use the string dot pad start method. We're going to say 2 and then 0. So I'm going to show you without this pad start thing first to see what it actually does. So I'll just cut that and save it. We get 3 right here. Now, whatever it might be. So bad example. Let's just let's make this minutes and hope we are okay. Let's do one for minutes right here. We're just copy and pasting the same thing for the minutes one. So we can say minutes, then we can say minutes right here, and hopefully now I can show you this pad start thing. So save this. We get 18. You know what? Let's use the console down here. So what is this pad start? Well, if I have 1, for example, it is of course 1. What I can do is, if I want this to be 0, 1, I can use pad start. I can say 1, then I can say dot pad start, and then pass through here 2 as the maximum length, then 0 as my filling character. Press enter, we now get 0, 1. So we're going to see it work now with seconds. If I'm quick, we can say toString dot to pad start, then we can say 2, then 0, save this, and we get 04, 03 instead of 5, etc. Single digit. Anyway, let's do the same thing for the minutes right down here. Then just duplicate these lines, do the same thing for the hours, just like this. And when it comes to the days, if I was to say days right here, we get 0. Reason is the same reason as before, and that is it is using the actual sort of cut down between 0 and 30 days instead of the absolute how many days until, if that makes sense. So to fix that, we can say once again as days, and we get that large number once again. So to fix this, to reduce this number, we can just say right down here after the as days, to fixed, and then pass through 0 right inside here. That is going to fix our number to a single or no decimal places. Save this, 330, 1, 17, and 0, just like that. So we are almost done. The last thing to do is going to be to protect against cases where you pass in negative dates or the day has already passed. So for example, if I say New Year's Eve last year, what's going to happen? Negative everything. Okay, so we don't want that. Instead, we're going to say right up here, before our check, we're going to say if duration dot as milliseconds is less than or equal to 0, then we're just going to return. So basically, if our duration length, just like we did for the as days, this time getting it as milliseconds, if our total duration length is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to return, and this right here is just going to stop the execution of the function and stop our code from running. So saving this, and we keep 0, 0, and it's all good. If I make this 2021, we of course get the desired result. So that right there is how to create a countdown timer using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I'll be leaving the code to this in the description below if you want to check that out and download it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.